Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 77 of compassionate response to COVID-19 with my buddy. So today, hopefully, we've got Padmapani and Vimla Mitra, who were around in the very early days of the movement. They both were ordained in the mid-1970s. Padmapani's having a bit of trouble getting in onto Zoom, so and Vimla Mitra is going to join us about 8 o'clock. So hopefully that's going to work out okay.
Good morning.
Morning, Padmapani. Great. Good. It always works out in some way or other.
I've just come to basically support them, Mitra, but
Yeah.
we might take off. Who knows?
Yeah.
I'm just about to do that. I'm thinking of doing a portrait of James Hillman, and
Oh yeah. All right.
if I do it and become successful, I'm going to give it to Atla.
Right.
So I think he would like.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I'm going to do do a bit of body work now, so you can get on with your meditation and that.
Thank you. See you at 8.
So, yeah.
Bye.
All right. So let's begin by just swinging side to side. And it's always the same, just trying to have mind and body in the same place. One not ahead of the other. And just allowing the mind to kind of disengage a bit, really, the thinking mind, disengage with what you're doing, so you don't need to be in control of it. And you're tuning into what's happening in your body, the energy and the sensations in your body. And just allowing the momentum, which is starting in each foot, and then moves up through your hip, and then it ends up with a rotation. And just let that take care of itself. So your shoulders are as loose as they can be. And hopefully when you're doing this, if you've been a bit stiff or feeling a bit resistant to meditating, that something will shift and you'll start to feel a bit more enthusiastic. And then rotating the hips. and just put one arm over the top, and then just little movements. So you're pulling up on one side and you're pushing down on the other. Try to keep your spine as upright as possible. So a little stretch and then back again, release and stretch and release. Little movements. Pulling up on the one side, pushing down on the other. And then the other side. Little movements, backs and forwards, pulling up on one side, pushing down on the other. Shake everything out, shake hands and feet. Your hands together. And then this sort of movement. Stretch and hold. And then gently to the other side. Stretch and hold. Feeling the twist in your torso. Again, the other side. Stretch and hold. Okay, and then just put your hands on your stomach, just below your belly button. Bending your knees as you breathe out. Straighten your knees as you breathe out. And then put your hands out the front, so as you breathe in, just bringing your hands up to your chin, and then as you breathe out, taking them down to your hips. And then on the in-breath, bring them up to your chin, and on the out-breath, down to your hips. Up on the in-breath, and this time on the out-breath, out to the front. And then down. And out to the front. And down. And out to the front. And down. And then getting into your meditation posture. So we're going to do some mindfulness of breathing this morning. So just getting used to being in your body being in another position, different position to before. Feeling the contact of your feet with the ground and your body with the chair or the cushions. And being aware of the world of the senses. So you've got 5 physical senses. Being aware of touch sensations, and sights, sounds, and then smell and taste. Just allowing the world of the senses just be there, and as it were, the impressions come in to you and impact on you, on the organs of sense, your eyes and ears and so on, and then the signal just turns into electricity and goes down your nerves and into your brain, and it's just a natural process. So you're just receiving the world into a soft awareness. And acknowledging how you're feeling at the moment, what sort of state you're in emotionally and mentally. And having a sense that however you are, you want to look after yourself, care for yourself, and that this meditation practice is part of all of that. So we're going to use the breath just to become a bit more centered in our experience, a bit less distracted. And we're going to just watch the detail of the breath from moment to moment. So we're not going to do any counting stages, just watching the detail of the breath. So do we know what's happening in each moment, in the actual detail of the breath? So the detail of the breath is we're not being vague about it. It's quite specific. What's actually happening? What can you say is happening in terms of sensation and movement in the breath from moment to moment? So if you're focused on the detail in the breath, you can't be focused on the detail of anything else, like what you're worried about or other things. So what can you say is happening in your breath in this moment, and in the next moment, and the next? Do you know whether you know what's happening or not? If you get lost, just come back to the next bit of detail in the breath. So have you just slipped into being just vaguely aware of that you're breathing, that you don't know what the detail is? If you have, just keep coming back to the next bit of detail. What can you say is happening right now? And then now, and now. Using the breath, awareness of the breath as a way of turning up for yourself and your life and other people. As if it matters. So in your own time, bringing that meditation to a close.
Well, here we are, two of the musketeers.
Yeah.
Indeed.
We'll explain what that is.
Yes, we will.
Yeah. All right.
That was myself, Padmapani, and David Priya.
Yeah.
We were called the Three Musketeers.
Yeah. Why was that then? So I just hang on a minute. I'll just say. So this session is we're talking about Triratna in the 1970s, and you two
pre-Triratna, really.
Pre-Triratna, 1970s. So you two were there very early days and all that. Okay, kick off. Go on then. Get going.
Go on, Vimal Mitchell. You get going. I'll come in because it's your show.
The first thing I can say about us three, I'll have to go back further, but I think I met, let me see, David Priya in around about March 1971.
Yeah.
On my first acid trip. Sorry. It was.
It's quite normal in those days.
Oh, well, it was what you did, wasn't it? It was like, smoking cigarettes or something, things like that. And then, to cut a long story short, and it is, I think I met Padmapani in September 1971. I'd seen him around, but hadn't really had any much communication with him. It was just glimpses of him. And then he turned up at my flat. And at that time, my girlfriend had gone off with my car and someone else, so I was feeling a bit depressed. And he must have heard about it, because he kind of came round and said, "Hello, Graham. Would you like to come down to Derrium, the cottage where he was staying, and kind of spend a bit of time down there?" So I think he kind of depressed and was, kind of invited me down to give me a bit of a chivvy up.
Mm.
And
yes.
Go on.
No, it's all coming back as you're telling me. We're talking about 50 years ago now, or just under. So the memory's a bit rusty for me. But just prior to what you're saying there, Mitra, my background was I was doing advertising, and I got into taking LSD, and I became more and more disillusioned by the world I was in, which was advertising. Yeah, so I jacked it all in. I went to live up in a commune up in Yorkshire, where I lived with Barbara, but where I met Barbara Cohen, my partner, who moved back down to a place called Derrium with me in Maidstone, just outside Maidstone, back to the Medway towns. Prior to me leaving my job and going off up to Yorkshire for about a year and a half, I had met up with a group of people, Glenn Shellcross and his girlfriend, and Tim Biggood, and we formed a thing called Dog Division, which I'll explain a bit later on. But when I came back again, and that's when I met David Prier. He was unmistakably David Prier had hair, very long hair, down below his waist from his head. He's an extremely tall guy. He's about 6'2", I think then. And he always walked around in a 25-pound Gestapo Mac. So he was very distinctive. And he was one of the biggest pushers in the Medway towns. Anyway, that's how I met him. That's a bit of a brief intro to how I met Vimla Mitra during that period.
The salubrious group, eh?
Yeah.
So was he the first order member you came across then, or what? Is that why you mentioned
it? It wasn't a case of order members. There was no bounty. There was no one.
Oh, he wasn't ordained then? He was...
No, this is way back in for me, it was 1969.
Right, okay.
So this is prior to me. Do you remember last time we talked about this? Is prior to me, Vimla Mitra, and a lot of people moving to Archway about 1972. We're talking about the group prior to moving to Archway, which included, interesting enough, Jim Carroll, Sabuti, Lynn Ann Hill, Marici, Fadra Kumara, myself, Barbara Cohen, and one or two people who came up to Archway. I'm linking in what I said before with the Dhamma Mattis thing about 3 weeks ago. Yeah, no, it was interesting. Anyway, I'll get back to, because it's been the Mitra's thing. That's the background.
Yeah.
But the dog division thing is interesting to go into. Very, very interesting, because there's a bit of a story there. Anyway, you go ahead.
I was working at a Greyhound stadium at the time, because my father owned it. My grandfather had started it. So that's a colourful episode. I think he was a bit of a rogue, but my father wasn't. But anyway, I ended up working at this Greyhound stadium in Rochester. I'd moved down from North London, Middlesex, Ruislip by the woods, which was nice and leafy, to the top of City Way. And I had this flat up there by the side of the Greyhound Stadium. And I was working there, but...
it was a house?
Yes, it was a house, but it was only the top part that was actually kind of livable in, really. It was just bottom of the shelf. But there was this kind of base, and I was meeting all these bizarre people who, you know, kind of brought me alive, I'd say. I was living on my own for about a year and a half or something. And then all of a sudden I went to the local college and started meeting people. And meeting Donna, the first girlfriend, she was a bit of an acid queen at that time. Certainly kind of brought me away. And then I met Deva Priya and eventually Padma Pani. In the meanwhile, I'd gone to America because she was police after her. And I got off to America, followed her over, and then came back. And it kind of felt at a bit of a kind of a dead end in a way. So I think things changed when Padma Pani came back. It was quite an auspicious kind of occasion, really, because I came with him to Derry and I thought, this looks interesting. And apart from other things we might have been doing at that time at that place, which I won't go into, we threw the I Ching, or he threw the I Ching for me, or we threw it together or something. And what came up was quite an interesting reading. It was Brotherhood with Men and Brilliance. So that had quite an effect on me. And I thought, you know, kind of perhaps just relationships aren't going to do it. Maybe I need to really develop a really strong brotherhood. And I mean, I had been going down to Glastonbury a bit, so there had been a bit of camaraderie going, but I think it kind of impelled me to kind of feeling that together with, you know, kind of guys, etc., we could look for, well, I don't know, the ultimate. I was always looking. I'd been looking for a long while for a meaning in life because I hadn't seen it. And I was quite worried that there wasn't it, right? A bit of Hinduism, astrology. I'd been into Rosicrucianism. I'd been doing a few practices, staring into the mirror, kind of a stillness, a bit like, you know, pre-shunyata kind of experiences, but I didn't know anyone. I didn't know anyone who kind of, you know, knew anything, really. So shortly after meeting Padma Pani and this brilliant reading, I think early the next year, or maybe it was that same autumn, Subhuti turned up and was starting to teach meditation. I don't remember much about the meditation. I don't think I meditated. But I thought, now that's interesting. He obviously had just kind of been in contact with Sangharashta at that time. He'd just been in contact. And he'd moved down to that area in Rochester or around in the countryside and was working on a farm down.
Can I interrupt?
Yes, come in.
And fill in a little bit here. So for the audience and Mahabodhi, I'll just explain a bit of the background here. What happened was, do you remember I said Subhuti had been up in London and doing his degree at Northern London Polytechnic, and he rang me up and he told me about Bhante Sangharashta doing work at the now or very early opened Archway Centre. And we went up there, and you came with us, Mitra, and then Bhante came down to where Subhuti was living, and I brought the crowd over, the Derryan crowd, the people that were interested. Interesting, Glenn didn't come, but the others came. and Bandy did a day retreat on Alex's farm there, where he was living with Lynn Antel, who then became Marici. So Bandy was very explorative in these early days. He was looking to form a Sangha, and there was a nucleus of a Sangha forming. And because there was quite a lot of us in our crowd, well, my crowd, our crowd, we joined forces with Alex and Lynn, and Bandy came down and did this day retreat. And I remember Mangala came down, although I'm not sure he was ordained then. Mangala came down for that retreat as well. Anyway, it was a very successful day retreat, and I remember it very clearly. And Bandy was on really good form. Yeah. Anyway, just to fill you in on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I came with Donna and a pair of Siamese kittens. Do I remember much about the day? Not a lot, actually. Although I was very impressed with Bandy Sangharat. That was, he obviously had something. It's like another click after the reading, had before, or brother. I mean, meeting him, it just seemed to kind of all click as if it was going in a certain direction. It seemed to be a certain impetus. And the very fact that a lot of the group that I'd been starting to get involved with was forming, there was the brotherhood. It was kind of interesting.
But
and then anyway, hold on, let me kind of just do this.
Sure.
You can fill in the real details, but I think as time went on after that, we started going regularly, if I remember, down to London in an old transit van, to the various talks. We used to have a talk with Banty at this new centre and in Archway. And then there'd be a puja, etc., the meditation. And then we go back in the evening. So we used to come down quite a way, Rochester, an hour or so, hour and a half, and then go back the same evening. But I don't know if it was right away, but the really interesting thing is that there was the series of talks on Tantric Buddhism, on Padmasambhava. That one, with it was quite astounding. Bounty was on top form. It was, it just confirmed those kind of talks and lectures and the pujas afterwards just confirmed that this was the direction. There was something real. There was something to live for. There was something to find out about. There was somewhere to go. So that was extremely important. And that tantric system was just out of the world.
Yeah. Can I just say to the audience that what happened was, prior to this ringing up the Subhuti and saying there's this guy up here in Archway, there had been a group, and we called ourselves Dog Division, which the name Dog Division came from a large Land Rover, a military Land Rover that somebody bought in the group, and we used it to go on visits and things like that. Now, this is very interesting because this group that I was like part of, there was about 4 or 5 of us, and we would do things. Mainly we were inspired by what was happening in the social world around us and the world, but we were very, very interested and thirsty for knowledge of the world and everything. Obviously, the psychedelic revolution had really fired up our imaginations. It was during this period I personally discovered Glastonbury, But that experience of the Glastonbury thing put us in good stead later on, because I brought David Prier down to Glastonbury years later. But the initial impetus to go to Glastonbury came from David Bowie. Literally, because I actually met him and he told me to go there. It's extraordinary. I know it's really weird, this, but so let me explain very briefly. I was in. I used to go up to a place called the Arts Lab in Covent Garden. Before it was the trendy Covent Garden we know, it was a vegetable market.
What year was this?
Well, this will be about 68, 69. And what happened was, during this period, at Covent Garden, Jeff Dexter, who was a DJ there, used to do stuff at the Roundhouse there.
Ah, right.
He also was at this place doing this thing and introducing David Bowie. Now, David Bowie, really nice guy, very accessible then. He was doing this mime of Tibetans being tortured by the Chinese in this Arts Lab event. And afterwards, you could go and chat to him, you know, he'd have a drink and stuff. We were talking. And I was telling about, you know, kind of interesting experiences I had on acid. And he was totally plugged in. And he was saying, you ought to go to Glastonbury, man. It's really cool. I said, what do you mean? He said, you ought to get this magazine called Albion. So I got this magazine because they were selling it there. And it had all about ley line energy in Glastonbury. So Dog Division went down there. And I had this really powerful experience. Which linked into, did I tell you the experiences I had when I was 15, when I had my first UFO encounters? Did I tell you?
Here we go.
Here we go.
Did I tell you this? Mark,
no, you didn't. Well,
okay.
Not
okay,
on
there. But it's very interesting. It's an extremely interesting story. If you can just bear a minute. And we'll go back to it and bring it up to the present, but it fulfills a certain chapter before we can move on to Archway. So I was down there. I took this LSD in the evening, and I saw this guy in my imagination on a full trip being led up the tour, where he was hung, drawn, and quartered. A very unpleasant experience on LSD, I can tell you. But the thing that really shocked me was that it had some resonance to something. Now, when I had this UFO experience, I was only 15. I didn't take drugs for 8 years after that. So this is like very naive, only a mid-teenager living with my parents and quite naive. Anyway, I was very into astrology and astronomy, but particularly astronomy. I knew all the stars and where they were. And anyway, I was woken up in the middle of the night, and I walked to the window, slightly sleepwalking, and I saw what I thought was the moon rising, but it was rising too fast. It came right up. And of course, the moon wasn't meant to be in the sky at that time, so I knew that. And then it just stopped, and it was about the same size as the moon, just a round disc. So I opened the window, and it was in the summer, these kind of beams came towards me, and I realized, this is really weird. Is this what they call a UFO? You know, because it'd been on the Tonight program on television the night before. Cliff Mitchell-Moore was talking about it. Anyway, I was so knocked out by this. I went next door to wake up my parents to say there's a UFO outside, and they said, "I'll go back to sleep, David. You know, or talk about it in the morning." So I went back, and then it was still there, but it shot off. And anyway, cut long story short, after that experience, I started having a dream that this same craft, this UFO thing, will come down outside and land in the front garden of our house. And it used to come regularly, this dream, every month, right through to when I took this LSD trip at Glastonbury, when it suddenly stopped. All those years. And in this dream, this UFO would come down, a door would open up, and this guy, who I remember vividly, because I saw him time and time again, beaming out light from his chest, and he had a slightly bald head and everything, would be oozing what we can only call meta, or or compassion or something. Really extraordinary. Anyway, it kind of kept me connected with the whole UFO thing. And there I was on Glastonbury tour. I went up there and I saw this thing. And then the next day, I think David Priya was with us then. The next day, we were down by a tea shop at Glastonbury High Street. And we walked in there and we were talking to these women who ran the shop. And they said, there's a seance we have here every night. I'm sure, fortunately, you can't come into it because it's a closed shop. But we always have this, and there's this secret passage from here linking us with the Abbey, which was next door. And I said, well, what happens in these seances? They said, well, this guy comes to visit us, and they produce these pictures. They produce these pictures of this guy that comes to visit them in the seance in this shop. When the shop's shut and it's above in private quarters. And it was the same guy, I'm not kidding you, it was the same guy that had been appearing in my dreams. So from 15 to when I was 23, the exact same guy. And it was Abbott Whiting. Now, he was the guy that was taken up to the tour and hung, drawn and quartered. Unbelievable. So this was my first experience that introduced me to Glastonbury, David Priya to Glastonbury, and had a big, big connection with me. And that was all part of the dog division thing we used to do. We used to do all sorts of things, go to Stonehenge and stuff. But when Banty came on the scene, this group started dissolving. I realized I wanted to move on. We were all a bit stuck. And Banty was really very, very attractive to me and this other group. So we split off from the other group and we just all moved up to London. Anyway, I wanted to tell you that because it's all a bit of the history of the dog division and everything. Okay, right.
Yeah, so you talk about Glastonbury, so a lot of people think Glastonbury Festival, won't they? So
no, I meant the tour in the town.
Yeah. So the Glastonbury Festival started in the early 70s, didn't it?
The Arthurian myth, I got really into it, and the Glastonbury Zodiac and everything. Yeah. So I'm very versed in all that stuff. I studied it for years. Anyway, it's a way of introducing and keying in. David Priya was really plugged into Glastonbury after that, and also but he was still staying down there. And when we moved up to London, I decided one day to go down and get him. And I thought, well, how am I going to do it? Because David Priya had massive defense systems. So I took some LSD and I went to Intrigue Boutique, which is where he was living at Star Hill, that famous place where I used to get egg and chips at Andy Snacks. Remember, we talked about it.
Yes, we know. Yeah, remember that.
And there were some shops around that area, and one of them was called Intrigue Boutique. And upstairs, David Priya lived with a few other lads in a flat. And I went to get him because I could see the potential in him. He's a smart guy. And I wanted to pull him in to the circle of new friends we were having up in Archway, with the squats. So there's a squat for him to go in. Anyway, that's a bit of the background. Fits in a bit what I was saying last time we've done with Matty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you want to pick it up again, Larissa?
Pick it up, Vimla?
Let's see. So, coming down to London, as we started going down to the New London Centre in Archway,
what year is this?
I think this was
1972, I think.
1972. Yeah, beginning of 1972, I think, regularly. And I remember going on a retreat at Heffold's. There was a couple of retreats we went on. They were kind of places where sometimes Tibet refugees stayed or, were kind of placed originally before they were rehoused. Because there was an organisation to, rehouse or look after Tibetan refugees who were, running from the Chinese. Anyway, a lot of these places, Heffold's and other places, you know, we used them for retreats, and Bounty was there, and that was quite impressive. Oh yes, I suppose I better mention something about that, because on one of those retreats, one of the things was there was I'm trying to remember the name of the organ. I think it was Tara. I think her name was Tara, and she was teaching Iyengar yoga, and I was trying to meditate, but was finding quite difficult because it was quite up in my head. I was just getting headaches and not getting very far. So I decided to go to join in her yoga, and that was a revelation. After the yoga class, I could feel the energy moving, and I could meditate. So that was my introduction into yoga, which I'm still doing. I'm still teaching yoga now on Zoom. I really got into it because I realized that was my way into meditation. It actually got the energy moving. So that was my introduction there. She was very good. I kept going to her for quite a few years. And, kind of during those retreats, you got more personal contact with Banty, etc. And I got encouraged to kind of, getting more involved in the movement, move up to London. I was still in Medway. And in early 1973, I'm not sure, but at that time, I don't know whether David Priya had moved up by then, early 1973. I know Pabapani had moved up.
He came, yes. I think it was short. We were there about 6 to 9 months, and then I got David Priya, and he came up about a month later.
When?
Anyway, I think it was 73, and he moved into...
early 73?
I would say so, down to Prince of Wales Crescent in Camden.
Yes, that's right. Well, I think before that, I think maybe before he came up, I think just before he came up, I had an old friend contact, and he wanted to go to India, and he wanted me to lend him £1,000 to do it.
Oh. Okay.
So I didn't have the money at the time because I'd spent it all going to America. But I contacted my mother and persuaded her to lend it to him. He was an interesting guy, and he wanted to do a documentary on the Dalai Lama. Now, the background to that was that the Dalai Lama had been kind of a bit stonewalled and tucked away by the Indians because they were worried about upsetting the Chinese, which were now on their borders. Notice local events. The Chinese were already up to, kind of trouble. So they didn't want to stir up the Chinese by kind of giving the Dalai Lama free rein. So my friend had picked up on this and thought that he would do a documentary of that, and so help it to kind of, get out of being hidden in the background, so he can start practicing Buddhism. So that
I remember the couple.
Yeah, so that was the background. So I went off in, I think it was February, for 3 months to India. We flew off to India, got up to Dharamsala, or actually, it was the village at the bottom. I can't remember the name of the village at the bottom. And,
what's that called?
I can't remember. Yeah. Anyway, so he stayed there. He didn't want to go up there because he was worried about being arrested by the Indian security guard. So he sent me. So I walked up the hill, took me about an hour and a half, and went to see the Dalai Lama's secretary and talked to him.
That would have been at MacLeod Ganj.
That's right. MacLeod Ganj. That's right. And so I talked to the Dalai Lama's secretary, said, well, you know, he wants to meet, etc. And the secretary said, well, why isn't he here? Why are you here? And I said, oh, well, he's worried about getting arrested, etc. Anyway, the secretary said, well, no, it's not on at the moment. No, I'm afraid we're not going to do that. Because what had happened in the meantime, we didn't know, is that they had come to some kind of arrangement which would give the Dalai Lama more freedom to practice. So therefore, the secretary, or what communication my friend had was no longer necessary and would have been problematical. Didn't want a documentary because that would have upset the Indians and closed him down again. So actually, it turned out that the whole episode was a bit of a failure for him. So he went back to London, but I was out there and I thought, right, well, I'm going to stay out here. I suppose one of the impulses really was that my old girlfriend Donna was somewhere out in India, and I thought that I might be able to meet up. I don't know how. But anyway, I stayed at McLeod Gandhi up there with a few kind of other hippies out there. And interesting experiences meeting kind of various Tibetans. Some, you know, kind of... Oh, yes, I did a course out there. I think a course for about 3 or 4 days with Geshe Rabta, who actually came to England and did a course at Aryatara. I think he did. No, he didn't do a course. He did a day, and he did it at Aryatara. It'd been arranged by Padmaraj and the others there. Before Banti heard about it and decided to descend and keep an eye on it, because he didn't want what he considered a strange Lama actually doing stuff without him, kind of being in control. There we are. That's it. Anyway, that was something else. So I stayed off in India for 3 months and moved around. I'd met some Indians who my friend looked after. Went down to Bombay on my way to Goa, spent a bit of time down there. And on the way, interestingly, queuing up for the steamboat to Bombay, I met Donald. It's how things happen, very unlikely, but there you go. Anyway, long story short, I also went up to Nepal, actually. Yes, I went up to Nepal to help the Indian guys smuggle a film camera through the border, because for some reason, being Indians, they would not think to do it as an English thing, smuggle it. I don't know what that they, found out what I was smuggling through. Anyway,
what year was this?
This was in 1973.
Okay. So you were still living in Archway in the Squat?
No, I hadn't moved up by then. I was still in Rochester in the flat. Anyway, after those wonderful, exciting things and having a bit of an experience in that, I came back to England. I had my last meat meal on the plane back to British Airways, because that was all there was. Chicken, I think. And that's my last kind of meat. Anyway, got back and back to the flat a few days. Then Donna turned up, and we might have got together again, but then the mob that I knew down there kind of descended, and it, kind of on the flat and said, "Oh, you're back again," and kind of the relationship didn't take off. It's probably quite good, actually. But at that time, I think I must have been coming up to Archway again, getting involved, and getting ready to come up to London. I think actually what happened when I got back, I think this might have happened when I got back, is that you came down. David Freer was still down there in, Impulse or whatever it was.
Intrigue Boutique.
Intrigue Boutique. And I think it was then that we kind of had that strange experience in Intrigue when we were all together there. I think the three of us and maybe someone else. And what I experienced was there was just a realization that we were all going up to, well, you were already up in Archway. We were all going up to Archway. It was just like we were going to be on our way. And I think it was then that David Prior up. And I think then maybe a couple of months later, I moved up. And yes, we moved up. I think David Prior had got a place in the Prince of Wales Crescent in Camden, which was quite a live area. And I moved in kind of in this flat. I think it was a squat then. They were all squats.
So this is you lot all consciously moving up towards Archway where the centre was, you know.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, Camden wasn't all that far from Archway, so, you know, it was quite close. And I think around Archway, kind of, that was becoming a place to squat as well. There were all these, you know, kind of rows of houses weren't being used.
Yeah.
And, you know, kind of people were just kind of thinking, right, we'll move in. And there was a vibrant community, various people. Some people opening bakeries, some people, you know, playing music. I mean, it's quite extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, I remember visiting, because I went to Manchester University in 74, but I remember coming to London around that time, 73, hang on, 70. Yeah, one of the two. Yeah, around then I did visit London. I did stay actually in a squat in sort of Prince of Wales Crescent.
Right.
And there were really big posh houses, weren't there, you know, that people were squatting in, you know, for some reason. Yeah.
Oh, they were very posh kind of houses and flats, etc. Wonderful. There was a bakery across the road. Kind of, you know.
Yeah. So can we connect it up a bit more with Triratna, because I think we're kind of drifting a bit here.
Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe I can interject here, because getting back on track about what we said we were going to talk about. Because we had a brief thing of what we might be talking about. And one of them was Zengo, but you mentioned Quatermain and Kefolds.
Yes.
And the interesting thing was Banty at that time. He had taken under his wing a young Japanese monk called Zengo, and his name was Zengo Miraku, I think. And he was a very interesting guy. He was quite introverted. He wore glasses. He had an immaculate shaved head and had very, very neat clothes, you know, like shrine gear. It looked amazing. And apparently, I think his background was, his parents were quite wealthy, and they were Christian. But he rebelled against that background and become a Zen monk, or monk of Zen. And Bounty had taken him under his wing and invited him over to, you know, under his wing, under his auspicious things. Now, this fits into a bit what we were saying last time with Dalmamasi, and you weren't here, Vimna Mitra, but what happened is we talked about how Archway, things went very well for a while, but I think Banty got really fed up with people weren't going deeper or taking his message deeper, and Banty decided to have a sabbatical. And it was during this period of the sabbatical year in Cornwall, when he might not have been coming back, that Zengo, because we were all starved of having a teacher to teach us, Zengo, who we knew that was working with Banty, he led a retreat at Ariatara, and it was packed out. I was there, along with quite a lot of Majivajra, Dharmadina, Pamaraj. There's loads of Devaraj. There's loads of people there from Archway and the new Croydon area centre. Yeah? And Zengo was doing this, what we call a sesshin there, where just sitting effectively, where he used to say "Don't move," you know, and he was very effective of saying that. So the idea was, it was like zazen. You just stayed with the belly upright and you didn't move. And traditionally, you usually have a monk coming behind you with a stick and whack, and sometimes you'll be facing a wall, you know, Zazen style. And Banty was in Cornwall, and he'd been out of touch, and we were all slightly starved of a leader, and he basically, in this void that Banty had formed, this black hole, Zengo stepped in. And on this occasion, towards the end of the retreat, and it was the last night of the retreat, I think this was timed deliberately. I can't remember how the conversation exactly went, because he was a man of few words, but whatever he spoke, it was all quite exact. And he'll say, "Do not call me Zengo again." And then there was this dead silence. Then I bucked up the courage or foolishness. I popped the question, "Well, why not?" And he said, "I am Maitreya, the Buddha." And then there was this silence, and there was this terrible shriek and wailing, and people got distraught, banging their legs up and down on the shrine, and people were completely freaking out. It had a really powerful effect, and the whole thing was dissolved, and people coming up saying, "What the bloody hell happened there?" But what I'm saying is, the upshot of this was Banty got word of this. Now, I feel quite privileged here, because Banty wrote to people, and I still got the letter somewhere, saying that, look, Zengo cannot be Maitreya, the Buddha, as he proposed to say, because according to the scriptures, all traces of the Dharma have to go from the earth before Maitreya is going to be born on the human plane, from the Namakkaya level of the Buddha. Now, this is very interesting, because up till then, many people, including myself, had thought Maitreya not necessarily as a Buddha, but a bloody good meditation teacher. I mean, really top notch. And although I took Banty's words, I wasn't ordained then, of course. I was still David. Although I took, and other people took the words of Banty very seriously, we still liked doing meditation with Maitreya. But he was forming a new order of his own. And he got this guy up in this house up in Nottingham. And apparently it was the house that was featured in the book, Lady Chatterley's Lover. It was the same place where the book was written, or which meant to be the same place as in the book. I can't remember what. But he had his first retreat up there, and quite a lot of us went up there. Now, we were heeding, well, various degrees of heeding Banty's stuff, because we didn't want to fall foul of Banty, because he was definitely our main teacher, but he hadn't come back. And Zengo was going full throttle. He basically hijacked quite a lot of the Sangha, the future Sangha. So quite a lot of us were up there with the Zengo thing, but it was absolutely very, very good. I think it was a choice of you're either with him or with me. So I chose Banty. That brought me back to Archway a bit later on, but the whole Zengo thing was quite an incident. I don't know where he is now. I think he's still alive. Do you know him, Mitra?
No, I haven't heard from him at all. You know, he just seems to have faded into the background.
Yeah. But I had an audience with Banty about Zengo, and he said, this is just before I was ordained, so it must have been about 74, early 75. He said, "You know what, David? Zengo has a beautiful mandala, and there's a big crack through the whole mandala." So I said, "That sounds rather cryptic, Banty." I said, "Can you explain what that means?" He says, "Well, the mandala is the Christian mandala, and the crack is his dichotomy of being Maitreya, the Buddha." Anyway, he left it like that, and I've been puzzling for that for years after. And I thought it was very, very intriguing what Banty's thoughts on that were about how he saw Zengo. Because don't forget, Banty had brought him over and looked after him for years, and that basically was a stab in the back. Banty got off. Sango saw his chance, became my trader, but Banty didn't like it and started saying, "Look, hang on, this guy is not my trader," and he gave his reasons why.
So the other thing we're going to talk about was the building of the LBC, Sakavati and that. So,
oh yeah, well,
that's morph into that a bit.
I'll leave that over to Vimala Mitra because he was there the whole time. I was a photographer working for Pundarika that was trying to find the Sakavati, so I'll hand you over to Vimala.
Okay. Well, I was in at Sakavati in quite the early days.
So we're all ordained by now.
Yeah, well, I was ordained at the end of 1974, and that was interesting enough because I only got the private ordination from Bangor and Sangha in November, yeah, kind of, and then I got the public ordination in December from Ananda.
Oh, right.
Because Banty had gone off to there he is. He'd gone off to New Zealand.
First visit, yeah.
Yes, he'd gone off to New Zealand. He couldn't. I kind of asked for ordination at the last minute. I mean, I'd already asked before, kind of, and he was thinking, "Oh yes, well, I'll do you when I come back." But I think Lokamitra said, "Well, he may not come back, you know." And I thought, God, I've got to get done. I've got to get done before he goes. So I hustled him a few, kind of a week or a few days before he was flying off, and got done with Saga Marty halfway up number 5 Balmore Street in the mezzanine kind of level. So I got done rather quickly at the last minute. He kind of made a comment where they say they'll be asking me to ordain them on the steps of the play, Anyway, so I got done privately, but then someone had to finish me off as it. So Ananda was designated to do me at Aryatara. Ever since, Ananda has denied ever having done it. I've always felt a little kind of odd about it all. Kind of, maybe they have about me too. Anyway, so that was an interesting beginning. So then Lokamitra got me involved in teaching yoga. By that time, I got quite heavily involved in yoga, doing my own practice every day and going to whoever it was, I think Tara.
Then Subhuti found the LBC, didn't he?
Well, wait a minute. Yes, all right. I'm getting back on track. I won't lose the lose the track. By that time, the Mitra system had just started, and I think I got in at the beginning and got Subhuti and Padmaraja as my Kalyana Mitras. So at that time, the new order members wanted, to get kind of Kalyana Mitras. So they were quite easy to get. I got Subhuti because he was wisdom, I thought, and I got Padmaraja because I thought he represented the heart. And Lokamitra kind of thought I didn't, ask him because, well, he was my yoga guru. Anyway, if you were anyone and doing anything, and Subhuti was proclamating about the new centre, you were going to go to Sakavati because that was the thing, and you had to be on the boat. You had to, this was the big thing, the placement, the thing that you had to do really to kind of help Buddhism. So I got caught up in that and kind of, really keen and joined the group going there.
So that's converting the fire station into the London Buddhist Centre.
That's right. This old fire station. They found this old fire station which had burnt out, complete wreck. The kids were coming round and mucking about in it. A huge project, and Subhuti thought that he was going to do it with £10,000. I don't know where the £10,000 came from originally, but I mean, Sabuti has always been very enthusiastic. Anyway, I think I moved there in the summer of 1975. By the time I got there, there were 7 people already there. They'd been there for a month or a month and a half or something like that. And I joined there. And I didn't quite know what I was going to do. I didn't know what skills I picked up. I had had a go at putting a bit of plumbing in at number 5, and all the joints leaked. So I thought maybe not plumbing. And eventually was given the task of cooking and looking after housekeeping, more or less, for everyone else. So I did that for 6 months at Sakavati. It was a really interesting period for that first year. There was only about 8 of us to start off, and then gradually kind of more and more people joined. Over the years, some quite bizarre people joined. It was almost like anyone off the street who could do anything, who could do any work was pulled in. And so it's a really interesting period. And we were living in, pretty difficult conditions. No heating, of course, no hot water. I think we had gas for cooking, etc., and some form of electricity. But it was extremely basic, and because we were working on the building itself in our rooms, a lot of the time, kind of bits of the ceiling would be dropping down onto your bed and onto the floor. You had to kind of sweep a space on the floor to sit down to meditate, or do a bit of yoga, which I was trying to keep up. I couldn't keep up the yoga for long because I remember kind of doing my headstand, my 10-minute headstand after my yoga thing in the morning, and Sabuti storming in and said, "What are you doing? You can't be doing this yoga. Stop it and get back to work." So I couldn't do my 2-hour yoga session in the morning anymore. Anyway, it was a fantastic period. There was Atla, Punya, let me see.
Alia,
yes. Yes, Alia in particular. I can't remember the names now, but do you remember any of the names, Marty? There was
well, the trouble is I didn't actually start joining till the Manpower Service Commission in 1978, and I turned
that's a long time. That's a long time. Yeah. Oh, Mangala was there. Mangala was there.
Robert Gurkey.
Gurkey was there. I think he either was there or he joins
Ratnapani
in particular. See, he was quite practical.
And Jatari was there for a bit and then there were women working there as well. Women.
Yes, but they came in. It was a men's only thing for people staying there. But women came in to help. Now that was the thing. That was quite a controversial thing. It wasn't at the beginning. Women were coming.
Painful.
Yeah, women were coming in to work and help, but of course they lived elsewhere. And the whole plan of the idea, the original plan, was that yes, we were building a centre, and that there was going to be community for men and a community for women.
Yeah.
So that was the original plan. So of course the women were quite keen to help, though they weren't actually living while we were working. So that was the background.
That was a bit painful.
Yeah. I think we had Ratnaguna's father kind of actually joined us to do the electricity. He was the ex-chief of the electrics at Heathrow Airport. But he was brilliant for kind of getting the electrics going at Sakavati in the early day. And to get equipment, we had a few kind of East Enders coming round offering to sell us stuff that dropped off the back of a lorry. kind of. We didn't realise about that at the beginning, but that's apparently what happened, because we were in the East End in the 1970s. So
Yeah. And I was at Archway, working with David Freer in the Battery. Do you remember we talked about this? Employing people there, and I had a part-time job in the evening of doing photography, and I would come over occasionally to take photographs. Take the photographs to Triratna's photographic studio in a squat in Archway, very near Pundarika, and he'll develop them, and we'll have an ongoing kind of visual thing of what was going on to fundraise. So the whole thing was working in tandem before the Archway Centre collapsed, before it had to go back to the council to be demolished. And so there was this. Lokamitra was in charge of that area, and Subhuti was in charge of the new project. And there were various people like Triratna and myself, quite a lot of other people working from Pundarika supporting the structure. But when I went there with my camera, often there was a certain amount of people living in such harsh conditions. And of course, where I lived in the squat, the conditions were much better in Archway. So people felt a bit like, oh, you lucky bugger, like living there and having the best of both worlds. Well, I'm stuck here in this hellhole.
Yes, it was like you lucky so-and-sos were just visiting. And here we were living kind of with the ceiling falling down all over the place, kind of cold showers. We actually had to go down to York Baths, which was nearby, to get a bath, every kind of month or something, or whatever. And I remember some of us, including myself, were starting to get fungus. We had to go and get anti-fungus kind of ointment and things. So it was very grim conditions.
So how many years did it all go on then? The building project, Sakavati. How many years altogether?
Was it 3 years?
Well, 1975, the summer of 1975 to the end or autumn of 1978. I think things November went on into 79.
November 1978.
That's it, November 1978.
Although the 23rd of November.
Is that when it opened?
There were things which weren't finished, but they still continued. But the main stuff had been done. It had been open, regardless.
Yeah.
With a fire alarm system, which was just about working on a battery.
Yeah.
Banji had moved in to the flat area next to Sakavati to boost up the morale. He came during the Manpower Service Commission area from around about March 98, and he all the way through that whole period. It was great. It was a really big push because we could get money, we could get full wages, and we had to all march on file. I think it was Friday, down to the town hall, all get our money, come back to Sakavati. Yeah. And it worked very well. And it was a wonderful atmosphere the last few months, wasn't it? All towards completion, you could see it.
Yeah.
But when I was doing the photography years earlier, the one time they had dry rot, and I took some photographs that looked right down through 3 or 4 levels, right down to the basement where the shrine is.
And Punya was working on it with his tango, kind of drilling into the wall to kind of, so you could get this terrible mixture, which probably ruined quite a few people's lungs, kind of to get rid of the dry rot. It was really harsh, terrible work.
Well, it's exactly the same in Manchester. I mean, converting the warehouse, that took a year and 10 months. And we had like massive bits of dry rot, and it was really harsh conditions. And you're working in January, and there's no windows in the building, and
exactly,
that sort of thing. It's just dust everywhere.
But a tremendous sense of camaraderie, though.
Well, so when in Manchester, when we kind of finished the building, we couldn't quite believe it was ours. Did you have that experience?
Yeah,
I do remember in the early days of Sakavati, because there's no heating, so cold. Someone, who I won't mention, had chopped up some of the premium 4x2 and was, building a fire somewhere in the buildings just to keep warm. That was 4x2, which cost a lot of money, but they kind of didn't know much, so they just sawed it up and used it as wood. There's kind of things going on. I mean, I remember working on scaffolding, somewhere and putting things up. I think what happened was that at Secavity is that after a certain point, of course, the 10,000 evaporated. And this was about after a year or year and a half or something. And the idea was, Sabuti decided that we'd all go out. Some of us would keep on working, and some of us would go out to create money to keep us going. There'd be a building team, and then there'd be other things, like the thing I ran, which was Windhorse Transport. Swift and fast, which was a complete lie. It wasn't swift, it wasn't fast, it wasn't particularly efficient, but it was so cheap that, as someone said, we couldn't afford not to use you.
What was it, removals or something?
I went out with an old diesel van, and the kind of things you were doing was house moving or kind of moving stuff from one place to another. I mean, that Windows Transport was a real comedy, really. One of them was eventually towards the end, when it was realised that we weren't making any money. By this time, Taja Matthew joined, kind of working. And Sabuti said, sorry, but you're going to have to close. You're not making enough money, and it's, a bit of a distraction. I'd already burnt out one engine, diesel engine, going up to the north to deliver stuff, because it was so slow, kind of in top speed was really about 55 miles an hour.
So after the LBC was finished, what did you end up doing then?
Well, this was a very interesting thing, because by the time Secavity had gone halfway through, the myth of, a centre and a men and women's community had evaporated. There was going to be no women's community because, of course, you couldn't have a women's community as a men's community. Same thing. You just ask it for trouble. So that was gone. That was a bit kind of undermined.
That was very painful for the women.
Very painful for them, and I really felt that towards the end. At the end, what happened was there wasn't even going to be a men's community for the people who helped build it. It was only going to be the people who worked in the office and who ran the centre. So the people who, had worked on the place for 3.5 years or whatever it was, and the others were advised to go to the hard-to-let places and find somewhere to live. And then people like Atla and Alia and a few others.
Well, they were the highly skilled ones. They were the highly skilled people. Yeah.
They kind of immediately afterwards were kind of, one reason or another, went to what became Vajraloka and worked in even worse conditions. In the snow, etc. Doing this wreck building.
With no money. He had no money
and
to go on retreat or anything.
I mean, I can't understand how they could go from Secavity to that, kind of in the freezing cold for a year to do it up so Vajraloka. Anyway, they did.
Yeah.
And of course, none of them got the money or anything. They kind of came back with nothing, really.
Yeah.
And as I say, kind of, we didn't get to live in the community. We got into living the hard-to-let places. So you did feel a bit deflated afterwards.
Yeah.
Even though the whole project was wonderful, there was a great camaraderie. It was kind of really impressive, and character building, etc. I was also running the entertainment division. So I was arranging going to operas at Sadler's Wells, Handel's operas, and also the new National Theatre, who kind of seeing the various kind of brilliant plays there. And if you got there early enough, you could line up and get, 20 tickets for £2 each. So I was arranging all that. we did a version. We did a version of King Lear, one winter in Sakavati. That was fun. No, I mean the whole thing was a wonderful experience, but also a bit of a nightmare as well.
Yeah.
But a wonderful experience, and it's turned out to be wonderful, of course, for a lot of people. The LBC, but I wouldn't want to do anything like that again.
Yeah.
I call it our national service.
Yeah.
It's a bit like joining the army. You've been in the army now.
Yeah. I mean, that thing about, people putting a lot into putting in maybe more than they thought they would. I mean, I think that happened in Manchester the same, really. It's like...
Did it?
Yeah, it's the same. And I think it's natural, isn't it, to kind of want something back. I've done this, therefore I want something back. And in a way, the Buddhism doesn't do that, does it? It doesn't sort of give you something back.
It's a question of kind of the promises made, which evaporated.
Sure.
In a way, it was okay, but it was a bit kind of at the same time. Oh, what they said hasn't happened. It's a bit like yes, it's going to be. You're going to be living in Sakavati, the Buddhist world. And then you're in a hard to let. It's all right. It's all right because it didn't matter at all to us because we were quite happy living in. We've been living in kind of quite low wages and food, etc.
It was all a bit of a shock. It was all a bit of a shock because, for instance, when I'm aware of the time we're closing up, but when I came back from India, do you remember after Sakavati, I went to India with Banti and Yuvraj. I did my travelling. When I came back, I arrived at the LBC expecting to walk into Sakavati, not knowing all this stuff that Vinamitra had just been saying. And I had my keys, and they demanded the keys back, and I wouldn't give them to them. I said, "Look, I've earned the place. I've earned this key. I've earned this key. Yeah, you don't live here." I said, "I do live. We do live here. You don't." So I had to give these keys back to these strangers that were running these newfangled things called computers. And there's the world of the computers and the dishwasher, and they were starting up the restaurant next door. It was the beginning of the early stages of the co-op and the free
done all
Cs,
the work.
The free Cs, communities, co-ops, communities. Communities, co-ops. What was the other one?
The Phoenix housing, of course, started up as well. Kind of not long afterwards with help from Prakasha and David Briers.
And what was interesting, just to finish off, the whole thing was the start of the world of the institutions. Yeah. After Sakavati, it was the beginning of the institutions. And with that, there was this kind of distance away from this really productive experience of guys working together in a spiritual way. I might get castigated from that. But it is interesting that it was quite marked, the difference between before, in other words, the building Sakavati, and after. And it was a deliberate move towards having new people come in and take over businesses and things. They weren't part of the working, the bricks and mortar. They just came in and you were out. And you were out, but there weren't any squats anymore. So, effectively, you were out, literally on the street. What are you going to do?
A certain kind of intimacy also kind of had started to evaporate, between Banti and people.
Well, he moved to Padmalokam. I talked a little bit about that last time, that it was more difficult to see Banti on a personal level. Yeah. But the interesting thing is, for those people like Vinamitra and myself who remembered this experience, it's left a kind of, not a dye, but your memory goes quite deep. You remember the pre-institutional period, and that's something they can't take away from you. No. And it forms a basis of kind of worldly wisdom, really.
Yeah.
That you think you're doing something, and you're just part of something else. It's not personal to you, and the problem is it's very personal to you to get yourself involved to do this. And then you start enjoying it, and then it's taken away. And, and then a label gets slapped over your mouth, Mahayana or Bodhisattva or something, you know, just working for the impersonal use of other people, you know.
A bit of the magic, I think, had gone by then, as far as I remember. I think actually kind of things felt a bit flat comparatively after. I don't think Banty did quite so many lectures or talks after that. You know, kind of it was not quite, there might maybe a few more, but I think in a way, I think that even that evaporated.
The problem came without going into detail. The problem came, that was the beginning of what I call the hierarchical structure and the institutions. And the people that could carry on seeing Banty in the way that I saw Banty and other people like me were only people in the hierarchical institutions where you had to deal with the work, you know, with the day-to-day running of it. So it became less and less personal. Anyway, there you go. That's it.
One thing I always keep saying to people is that when I look at the order, you know, and when people have been ordained 20 years or 30 years or 40 years, you know, there's some
45, mate.
Oh yeah, 45. Yeah, it's almost like there's a qualitative difference, and maybe that's to do with the era that you grew up in, and you know, in a way, as you say, that can never be taken away from you, can it? It's like, you know, you were part of that, but then things change and move on, and
I think also it was the fact that, you know, we were coming out of the 60s and the 70s, and there was a certain aura, there was a certain kind of atmosphere there as well, which was quite unique. And as you got into the 80s and 90s, then
well, Thatcher came in.
That kind of magic, you know, kind of like the Glastonbury experiences with things like that, they weren't so prevalent. You know, things have become more Americanized and commercialized, and you know, England was just like the rest of the world. Like it moved from post-war kind of quaintness and you know, hippie 60 new life kind of anything could happen, and nuclear war with Russia, the Cold War thing, into kind of just the ordinary world.
This is why I get quite upset when people that are older, my generation, resign from the order, if they do, especially now that Banty's dead, because I think many of the older people, Local Banty did a survey of the order, and he noticed, this is in the 90s, I think he did this, it might have been 2000. He did a survey whereby he made a note of order members who had resigned in the order, and a large proportion of the people who resigned had people who hadn't been ordained by Banty. But the ones who had been ordained by Banty, who had personal connections with Banty, they were still there. So it was very interesting, this, because I feel that there was a bond or a samayar between the guru and you, which cemented something across the institutional divide. So if some order member resigns who's of the old school, that's a little bit worrying for me, you know, because all I could say is that, well, maybe it's changed now that Banty's no longer with us, you know, and that your only connection is with the institutions.
Yeah, I think that's why one of the reasons why I'm enjoying doing this sort of thing. It's like keeping that sense of you know, the older order, what they are, you know, alive, rather than
Recently, Adhisthana, they've been having this thing. Well, I call it the old lags, the old guys from the order. They get together, and it's very interesting because we go there and we don't have much of an agenda. In fact, there's no agenda. We make it up when we're there. There's very little institutional thing. There is a good feeling coming from Adhisthana that we are the elders. But the interesting thing is, when we're there, there's this wonderful feeling between all of us. And what it is, there's this kind of nous, this kind of knowledge of this period we're talking about. It's like given, it's a given. It's like, it's something which is really special. And yet, you might not know what the person's done. There's just that you've been around 40, 45 years or whatever, and or even 35 years or whatever. But there's something special about it, and I like that. I like
roots,
yeah. have you got any ideas about this? What do you think that might be, Mahabodhi?
Yeah, well,
that's-
I think often what the movement's about, it's like held in the culture, isn't it? So it's like it's indefinable, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it's the indefinable thing that that you feel a part of, because of all that history, And,
Yeah, but a lot of it came out of building projects. That kind of special bond between people. Amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway,
great. Well, thanks both of you. Yeah, that's been really interesting.
There's much more to say about the early days in Sakavati. Maybe another time.
Yeah.
Now we're all going on retreat tonight.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, we are, aren't we? To the Bardos.
Yeah, into the Bardos.
Yes, a different Bardo. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mahabodhi. All the best to you.
All right.
Thank you.